I was even shocked when I talked to one owner. He just says, I just budget for it. I was like, hold on. Can we rewind a second? You plan to be stolen from every year. And he's like, yes, 70% of practices will be embezzled from. And most people think when they think of embezzlement that it's just straight cash theft that's happening. But there's so many other forms of embezzlement that happen. And the fact that somebody just budgets for this, like, okay. They have a job that oversees 10 things and they're the only person who does it. They convince you that they're the only one who's capable of doing these kinds of things. They're overtly honest.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dental Truth Project. Very excited about our guest today. In fact, so excited that we were here talking for a half hour, and now we're finally getting to recording the episode. But we'll let her introduce herself here in just a moment. Ask Dallin's segment. There we go.
Thank you, Ken. I'm also very excited for our guest today, one of our old friends in dentistry. So we're going to have a great conversation. The Ask Dallin segment is how much should I be spending each month on marketing? This is a really good question because some of the other expense categories have some kind of fixed percentages that you ought to be spending. It's like for a single location, staff expense ought to be about 25%. Rent expense ought to be under 5%. Supply expense ought to be under 3%. But marketing is different because it depends on the patient flow that you are trying to drive. We have some groups that we're working with that are sitting at 1% and they have great patient flow because it's just the nature of their practice, the location they're in, relationships they have with the community. We have other groups that we're working with that are a little bit more startup. They haven't been around as long and they're pushing into 10% or 20% on marketing. And they're willing to take the loss on EBITDA for the time being so that they can just drive a ton of new patients in and really build up their base. But I'd say a good average to think about. So this is, middle of the bell curve. You're not trying to drive a ton of patients, but you're also not super established and don't have to worry about it. But just a standard run-of-the-mill practice, 3%. Is right around where you should be sitting. If that's about what your marketing spend is, chances are high that you're doing pretty good. And that's the Ask Dallin segment for today. So back to you, Ken.
All right. Thank you, Dallin. That was well articulated, especially the variances that can exist from practice to practice. Well, super excited for our guest today. Courtney, we're just going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself to our audience. And then once you're done with that, then we will have you tell us about what the truth is that you want to talk about today in dentistry.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I am Courtney Staiger. I am a certified fraud examiner. I am a senior fraud examiner with Prosperident. So as I just said, I'm a fraud examiner. For me, my truth is I don't think fraud and embezzlement is talked about enough. People are embarrassed about it. It seems to be a taboo subject. I kind of made it my mission recently to start talking about it in a better light and making more people aware of it. It's not something that we should be ashamed of.
I love that. Because I think fraud is one of those things that the whole fraud and embezzlement category, like you said, people don't really like to talk about it because for the most part, it's a preventative thing.
Yes.
Like everyone hopes that it's not going to happen to them and they can just slide by and keep on running their business and everything is going to be okay. They don't have to spend any time, energy, or effort trying to prevent it from happening. Like they just hope that they get by. We've had similar conversations on the podcast with cybersecurity experts, with insurance experts. There's kind of like this whole category of investment or expense where it's trying to prevent something bad from happening when you could just keep on sliding through your day-to-day hoping that it's going to happen to someone else.
You could not be more correct. As my own personal side project to try to kind of understand what's going on, fraud and embezzlement, I will ask small DSOs, individual practices, things like that, just about fraud and embezzlement, their practices, and even like what kind of fraud controls they have. I've talked to over 36 DSOs varying in range. Do you know that only a handful of them actually have fraud controls in place, or even like fraud prevention, ways to report fraud, how to look out for it? I was even shocked when I talked to one owner. He just says, I just budget for it. I blew me out of, I was like, hold on. Can we rewind a second? You plan to be stolen from every year. And he's like, yes.
That's
And I know.
wild.
Yeah. I mean, you guys do the accounting side of it. Like, are you helping them? I'm just curious. Like, do you guys like, you know what? Okay, here's your marketing budget. Here's your employee budget. You line item out your fraud and embezzlement, like budget part of it.
Well, next episode, that should be our question. What percentage of revenue every month should I be allocating for fraud and embezzlement? 1%, 2%, the real ambitious ones are trying to squeeze it down to 0.5%.
Right. It was wild to me. It struck me. I mean, I know fraud and embezzlement happens every day. It's what I do for a living. My job is a true life, true crime in bed by 9. That's literally my job, to do that. And it's around, 70% of practices will be embezzled from. And most people think when they think of embezzlement that it's just straight cash theft that's happening. But there's so many other forms of embezzlement that happen. And the fact that somebody just budgets for this, like, okay.
So help our listeners understand, because many of the people who listen to our podcast own and operate mid-sized DSOs. What warning signs could an owner be clued into that could indicate there's some sort of fraud and embezzlement happening?
That's a great question. The first one is going to be behavior of people that you're going to look for. People who are cagey or they need to own everything. They have a job that oversees 10 things and they're the only person who does it. They convince you that they're the only one who's capable of doing these kinds of things. They're overtly honest. And that's not to say that there aren't truly honest people out there who, are coming to you and saying, hey, come and take a look at that. What I mean by that is, take a look at this report. Do you see how much money I've made you? Do you see how much money I've collected today? They're really trying to be kind of forceful and getting you to believe them and to trust them. I'm hoping that makes sense.
No, it does. So behavior of people, I think all those signs check out. What about for an owner that isn't necessarily in every practice every day? So picture like running a 10 location DSO, you could pop in every now and again, but you're no longer there with that front office worker, that office manager all the time.
Then you're going to be relying heavily on your reports. And honestly, you need to start by pulling your own reports and not just allowing your office manager in each of those locations to provide it for you. And if they insist on providing it for you, instead of you going and getting your own information, you might want to think twice about that. And then the second part of that, if you have 10 of them and you are looking at your reports and you're going to ask questions because you don't understand, I mean, again, you guys see this come through in the information and you're like, hey, can you explain this AR to me? What's going on? And if there isn't an actual answer, or they seem to sidestep what's going on, or you're looking at it and you really can't make heads or tails for it, that might be a sign that something is going on. Now, runaway AR happens. We see it all the time. Insurances are slow to pay. You've got somebody who wasn't following up on insurance claims. But if there's not a valid reason for that, that might be a sign that something, nefarious is going on in there.
Interesting. And if you don't mind me drilling down even a little deeper, so AR would be one indicator.
Yes.
And that's if, like, I'm pulling a report, I'm looking at my AR balance every month, and I see it getting higher and higher.
Yes.
Are there trends in, like, production or collections? Or, like, if I'm looking at my P&L or my balance sheet, like, are there other specific numbers that I could be clued into here that could indicate a problem?
Your P&L might be an indicator in terms of things. For instance, I had a case, it wasn't embezzlement that was happening, but it made it look like embezzlement. And here's how. What was happening in that gap was refunds were being issued to patients, but they were using a platform that the accountant wasn't aware of. So they added a second platform to that. Now, in your profit and loss, when you're looking at that and you see, I refunded $500 and you're thinking to yourself, I think I wrote more checks than that for refunds, or I saw more than that going out. If you're refunding by original method of payment, your profit and loss should reflect that and it should show the exact same thing. If it doesn't, you might want to ask those questions about, well, why doesn't it? Is there something that you weren't aware of that somebody added on to that, sometimes it's completely valid what they're doing. And sometimes it's somebody has opened up something they shouldn't have and is refunding themselves for that. So profit and loss would be a good one. Trends in terms of AR. Again, looking at a case I recently had, they acquired the practice. You look at the AR over time and the AR is around $2,000 a month. And you guys would look at that and be like, wow, that's amazing. You only have $2,000 in outstanding AR at any given time.
That's unheard of.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so when they transitioned to the practice, you saw all of a sudden $18,000 a month. What happened? What happened between those? And even if you didn't acquire a practice, like if you see a large jump like that, what happened, for those jumps to happen? So those are kind of the things that you want to look for, or anomalies, or if there's no way a $2,000 AR would ever exist, maybe you want to go look at adjustments. Were they hiding it somewhere else? Because it happens, as far as things goes.
So Courtney, I've got a couple of questions here for you. Around this subject, obviously. The first one is, how frequently are you seeing that there is till cash being kept, and how much of the potential losses could be as a result of that, as opposed to being all digital, or is digital just as dangerous in that arena? I'd love to hear your take on that.
They're equally as dangerous. We do still, in every single one of my cases, I do have cash. Not cash theft, but they are accepting cash. In every single one of my cases, they are still accepting cash. Cash is not dead, but the digital is equally as dangerous as our checks. I cannot comfortably say that one method is safe to be able to do that. And before all of you doctors out there panic and think, oh my gosh, none of my money is safe, all of them can be exploited. In terms of, if somebody really wants your money, they're going to find a way to get your money. Yeah. Whether it's, credit cards, cash, stealing checks, the virtual credit cards, those can be stolen that are coming in, not just patient credit cards. Even EFTs. Before I even started working for Prosperident, I had a case where there was an office manager. He hadn't even worked at a DSO for 4 years, but he exploited that there was one carrier that they only received roughly $300 a month in insurance payments. And as most DSOs will be like, $300 is a rounding error. They didn't even catch that this $300 was being diverted to another account via EFT that person had set up. So even EFTs are not safe, I guess is what I'm getting to. There's things that you can do, obviously, to kind of help yourself in terms of things. And I don't know what you guys tell your DSOs, but, at Prosperident, if you are accepting like EFTs, you should have a separate account for your EFTs so that you can monitor those and see which ones are coming in. And it's very clear in terms of those. But
yeah, and you ought to be reconciling every one of those deposits to the EOB.
Yes. Reconciliation. That's a word that I don't know how many practices actually utilize that in its fullest extent.
So just kind of following this thought process that we're talking about and we're talking through, I'm curious, from your perspective, I'd like to hear how you think about till cash and protecting that component of it. And then I'd also like to hear kind of the best practice for any of the other sort of holes there are. Because I'd love for our listeners to be able to walk away with and say, hey, I know how to go plug these holes, at least as much as possible. Because I thought toward the beginning of the episode, I thought it was really wise of you to say that if somebody really wants to get your cash, they're probably going to figure out a way to get there. But to the degree that lots of honest people honest,
yeah.
What are the things that should these DSO leaders be thinking about and putting in place?
Fabulous question. My first thing, regardless of the method of payment, is going to be a separation of duties. No matter what, it's always going to be a separation of duties. And what I mean,
explain that really quick, just in case there's somebody that doesn't understand what that means.
100%. So separation of duties is the person that is accepting the payment or posting the payment should not be the person that is reconciling the payment and depositing the payment. It should be a different person. I always equate it to, Walmart, when you need like a price change on something, they have to go get, the person with the key over there. And that's to validate that what they're doing is not, something kind of shady or nefarious.
Same but it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
You're like, I'm just buying a razor and I have to stand in this line in order to get it.
It is. But in protecting your practice, there's ways that you can streamline that for sure. So again, if you're posting the payments, accepting the money, you should not be the person that's reconciling the money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The person that's reconciling it probably should also not be the person that's depositing it, so that there is a clear separation of who's responsible for what. In terms of end of day procedures, things that you might want to do. And again, whether it's cash, check, credit cards, does not matter. When you get that cash, you should, print out those receipts that go with it, or your day sheets that show how much cash it is. Count that cash right then and there. Both of you sign off on it, both the person that accepted it and the person that, is receiving it. And if you are the same person that is depositing it in the bank, the receipt that you received from the bank needs to equal that. And again, you'll want to sign it again and give it to the owner or operations person, validating that the two match together. And the same's going to ring true for checks. Do it right then and there at the end of the night, not a week, not a month later, the end of the day. I've chased many pennies in my life. It is much easier to chase a penny that day than it is to chase it a month or 2 months from now. So that's going to be your biggest thing, regardless of the method of payment.
That's so true. Some of the places where I've seen theft occur the most is where you have a well-meaning practice manager who just is like, I can't get to the bank. And all of a sudden they've got a bunch of cash in a drawer somewhere in the practice. And it's just because they haven't been able to get to the bank and they've got a life to live, and everything else. But those have been, I think, the times where I've seen some of the biggest challenges crop up.
Yes, the cash box. I'm not in love with the cash box at all. And the reason I don't love it is most dentists don't check their cash box daily. They go, on Friday to go check their cash box. So they're not entirely sure whether or not it's there. And they're also relying on their office manager to provide that report to them of that cash box. And there's no acknowledgement of handover from one to the other that A still equals A from point A to point B. So I'm not a fan of the cash box.
Yeah. I was just going to mention that when I was at Community Dental Partners as the CFO, one of the things we implemented was we would do till cash audits, and we would have our regional managers who were going into all the practices, checking in with everybody. And we would always have them do a till cash audit at whatever practice they were going to. They just knew that it was required. And the great part about that is everybody else knew what was going on there. And so they knew that there was a till box, and they knew that people were checking it on a very regular basis.
You brought up such a great point, and that's auditing. You should audit your practices on a regular basis. And it's not to say that somebody's doing wrong, but you're so right. Like, they're just going on and they're spot checking it. They're taking a look at it. And everything really should be audited. And I know the practice owners and DSOs are like, shh, right? Mind blown. I don't have to. But spot checks are really good. The audits are good. Audit your clinical notes. Audit those ledgers. Do they match each other? Are you missing revenue opportunities because the clinical note says you took a PA and nobody ever billed it out? Or did you bill a PA and it was never taken? So audits are a really, really good thing, not just in terms of, like you're saying, like the cash till, just audits in general are going to protect you from a lot of different things. And like Dallin said earlier, keeping honest people honest. That's not to say that people don't make mistakes. I'm human. I make them every day. A lot less likely that something bad's going to happen with the audits.
Nice. This has been such a great conversation. We're going to need to wrap up, but what are some of your kind of wrap up thoughts as you're thinking about this, Courtney? And you're thinking about all these DSO leaders and people that are listening, and you're on a mission for no losses whatsoever. I know that doesn't always happen, but what would be some of your key takeaways from this that you want our audience to take with them?
If you don't have a fraud prevention program, get one.
And can they reach out to you? Do you guys have a sample of that?
Absolutely. In fact, Prosperident actually has an owner proactive strategies, which is our preventive side of it. I'm a firm believer that everyone should go and do some kind of proactive, whether it's through us or another fraud examiner, fraud team. Have somebody come in and help you set up fraud prevention. Prevention is far less costly than it is reactive. I'm happy to see you on the reactive side. You're not as happy to see me though. And really it's no different than in your clinic. Think about your patients. You want to see them come in for their preventive treatment. We want to see you have your preventive stuff done. The reactive stuff, as we all know, is far more costly. We're talking losing $100,000 versus, spending $2,000 to have a proactive. That's a huge difference. I know I could do a lot with the $98,000. So
exactly.
Absolutely.
Dallin, do you have any Any final thoughts or questions before we wrap?
Let's wrap this thing up.
All right.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, Courtney, it was an absolute pleasure. It's rare that you see somebody that is literally in their element, and it's their happy place, and it's also their place of genius. And it's clear that you figured that out for yourself, and you're making a big difference. You and everybody there at Prosperident is making a great difference in the dental world. So we're so grateful for that. Grateful for you being on our podcast and educating us. And yeah, do you have any final thoughts? And we'll wrap.
No, you're right. It is definitely, I thought dentistry was my passion until I found embezzlement in dentistry. And that sounds really bad to say that I'm excited that people are stealing, but I enjoy the puzzle and I really do enjoy digging into it and finding out what's going on. And sometimes it is bad practices and I enjoy that part of it too, just really getting into it. So you're right. I love it. It's probably my favorite thing I've ever done in my career.
Awesome. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, you mind sharing your contact info?
Absolutely. You can definitely find me on LinkedIn for sure. I'll make sure that you have that. And you can obviously find me on Prosperident under our examiners, but there are a ton of amazing examiners at Prosperident, not just me. They're all really good at what they do.
Awesome. Well, cool. We're grateful that you were with us today. And
yeah, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.